What's up, everybody? Welcome to a Monday edition of What the Truck. I am your host, Malcolm Harris. I hope you guys had a lovely Valentine's Day weekend. Hope you had some love in your life, man. It's a beautiful time to be here on the show with you guys today. We got a lot coming up here in 45 minutes and quite a few guests. But before I get to them and before I get to introducing them, I got to give a shout out to Angie Taradara. All right. She was on the show representing Road Lights. Guys, there's a lot of gifts that I get here on What the Truck. And I did unbox this, but I just wanted to show you guys. I love Rick Ross. He's one of my favorite rappers, and I love hip hop for those that know me. So I don't know if y'all can see this, but I got a Rick Ross book. I also, let's see. Got another one. This is the perfect day to boss up. February 16th is the perfect day to boss up. And then last but not least, if you guys know me very, very, very well, which you should by now, we've been kicking it for a minute. You know, I love music and vinyl records. Y'all, I got Trilla, one of Rick Ross's best albums that he's made. Every day I'm hustling here with the truck. And I got to thank Angie for that. That was super sweet. I really appreciate it. And, you know, always feel free to send vinyl records to me here at FreightWaves. I will always take them and they will be highly appreciated. So thank you to Angie. Thank you to you guys for listening. And without further delay, let's get to On Deck because we got some great conversations coming up. We got a three-piece for you all right? The first is going to be Craig Leinauer, all right? He's going to be coming to us here shortly. He's representing Travelers. He's going to be talking all things when it comes to filing claims, all right? So documentation errors, valuing shipments correctly, and how to prevent costly headaches. You guys know it. And then coming up, we had a great pre-show call, and you guys are going to enjoy this conversation so much. Jennifer Karpus-Romain, she is what I call the Queen Connector. She is going to be on the show. She is representing the Transportation Marketing and Sales Association. She does so much with our organization, talking about how it's evolving, meeting the needs of sales and marketing professionals in transportation. They also have a weekly podcast I want to get into and then talk about their innovative track-based learning model. And then last but not least, you guys know I can't do this without Razor Ramon. I'm talking Danny Razor Ramon. He is a subject matter expert when it comes to all things fraud, cargo theft related, and much more. He is representing Overhaul, and we're going to talk about some BOL issues with Danny. So between Craig, between Jennifer, and between Danny, it is going to be a show for the books. But before we get to our guest, you guys know how we do it. Let's kick it around when it comes to the headlines. Over the weekend, I saw this and it came as I was sitting there on Valentine's Day. I went to Kentucky. I didn't do much. Went to Kentucky. My mom and my aunts, they were singing. It was beautiful. But I saw this and I wanted to show some light on it. So it is official. May 12th through the 14th of this year, ELDs will officially be having the International Road Check. All right. So with this, I saw it again and wanted to highlight this. And what happens is this is, of course, a 72-hour enforcement date. And again, May 13th through the 15th. It's international because they take place in the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. The inspection is a 37-point test. There's two major parts. There's an examination of the driver's operating requirements and an assessment of the vehicle's mechanical fitness. All right, so the driver focus in 2026 is basically going to be looking for tampering, falsification, or manipulation according to the CVSA. All right. So inaccurate ELD entries may result from a driver's understanding or lack thereof of that, as well as federal regulations and exemptions. However, in some cases, inaccurate entries are purposely used to conceal hours of service violations and other things as well. So for more information on this piece, definitely visit the website right now and shout out to John Kingston for an awesome, awesome article. Now, this is officially done. All right. So we had an article about this, but there has been a huge acquisition. All right, so Hapag-Lloyd has officially acquired Zim for billions. All right, so looking at this one right now, this happened again over the weekend and was officially finalized today. So 3.5, they've settled a little more on this as we've learned throughout. So officially, Hapag-Lloyd has now acquired Zim for, I want to say it's 4 point something billion. We'll get an estimated number on that, but again, The sale, it delists Zim shares, which went public in 2021 at a valuation of 1.5 billion. Its shares now value the company at 2.7 billion. So a lot of moving pieces and a lot of stuff happening in a wild and fast and furious start to 2026. Now, looking at this next article from Noy Mahoney, I saw this. If you guys aren't aware, he is of course our cross-border expert. He talks about all things when it comes to the U.S. and Mexico. And looking at this, exports of Mexican-made trucks in the U.S. fall to 54%. So looking at this, of course, exports, when it comes to Mexican-made heavy trucks, they have plunged in January, according to data. The sharp decline, it does represent the softness in cross-border demand, where production of Class 8 trucks in Mexico have been a key component of North America's supply chains. And analysts are pointing to slowing freight demands, inventory corrections, and macroeconomic uncertainty as kind of the reasons behind this. So this drop is a notable drop because Mexico is, again, a major supplier of heavy trucks into the U.S. market. So more on this from Noy, of course, at FreightWaves.com. And then last but not least, saw this from Eric earlier, and I wanted to touch on this. UPS has filed a legal response challenging a lawsuit brought up by the International Brotherhood of Teamsters related to the company's offer for up to $150,000 in voluntary buyouts for drivers. So now looking at this, again, they argue the buyout terms are violated in terms of aspects of the collective bargaining agreement, but UPS has contended that the suit is without merit and that the company is within its rights to extend voluntary separation incentives. So this dispute, it does follow, again, last year's intense contract negotiations, and it's almost essentially going to be, I mean, it's not essentially, it is, it's going to be one of the largest battles now in court. And again, this is labor tensions between one of the nation's largest freight and logistics employers. So this battle is going to loom interpretation over contract language and the scope of voluntary separation incentives. So again, more on this one from UPS right now on our website at FreightWaves.com. Now, I'm going to shift paces right now and bring out, again, representing Travelers. He is their director of inland marine claim at Travelers. Craig Leinauer, it is your hour. What's up, brother? How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How was your weekend? And did Valentine's Day go okay?
Valentine's Day went great. I got to tell you, it was actually very romantic for a change.
Oh, that's awesome. I love to hear it, man. And I appreciate you for, again, being on the show. And I want to talk because, you see cargo claims every single day. And when a loss happens, what's the first mistake you see when companies that end up kind of complicating the claim?
Yeah, so by far the most common issue we see is late notice, right? I mean, look, cargo claims are going to happen, and that's not a mistake, but the mistake is waiting too long to report them. In some cases, companies don't report a loss until many weeks later when invoices are received or accounting shortages show up. And the challenge with late notice, of course, is that it limits the ability to respond effectively, right? So because, evidence will become unavailable, documentation, for example, can be incomplete, and then it gets really hard to determine what actually happened. So really, from a claims perspective, it's important to report the claim as soon as you can, as soon as possible, so that the investigation can get started promptly.
Sounds like some critical advice. And so once a claim is reported, and we hope it's reported the right way, what's another mistake that could cause some issues and problems?
Well, another one is, report the loss immediately, even if all the details aren't known. Early notice is going to allow the adjuster to get involved right away, to preserve evidence, document conditions, and then guide you on next steps. So it also is going to help you, by the way, avoid potential issues with contractual or statutory deadlines. So, for example, if you have a COGSA, shipment that's subject to COGSA or CARMAC, there may be a claim filing deadline. It's going to help you keep ahead of that. But the key is really to have a process in place and then training your people to recognize that when something goes wrong, it really needs to be reported right away. So let me give you a claim example. So we recently had a $500,000 shipment of stolen baby formula. And in this case, the carrier reported it right away, and our adjuster was able to assign a theft investigator immediately who worked with law enforcement and then recovered the entire shipment. So we actually ended up paying out $0. We saved $500,000, and that's not an insignificant amount of money.
No, it's not at all. And I want to ask a follow-up to that, because what does good documentation actually look like in practice?
Yeah, so Good documentation is going to be proactive and consistent, right? So you're going to want to photograph cargo, the condition at pickup and delivery, especially if something feels off. You're going to want to keep seal records. You're going to want to document exceptions right away. And then you want to make sure that paperwork stays with the load and then it's retained afterward. Good documentation doesn't just help you from a claim perspective, it's going to help protect your company's position overall on many, many levels.
It's phenomenal, phenomenal advice, Craig. Now, another issue we hear about a lot is the confusion around cargo value. Now, how does this show up specifically when it comes to claims?
Yeah, sure. This is a really big one, actually. Not knowing the value of the load before it moves, right? So there's an important distinction between liability and insurance coverage. Insurance only pays up to your policy limits, but your liability can go way beyond that depending on what's in your contract or how much the cargo is actually worth, what the valuation is. So if you don't verify that shipment value up front and you confirm that they're within policy limits, what can happen is you can accidentally end up exposed to losses that exceed your insurance coverage, right? So this is a very common mistake that we see. Fortunately, it's easy to prevent if you're proactive.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, can you give us an example of how this value discrepancy, how it occurs, and to make sure that it doesn't? Because I know there's a lot on the line when it comes to this.
Yeah, so let me give you an example. So we recently had an insured who was hired as a motor carrier to pick up an industrial scissor lift. The trailer was hit by a train, and the cargo was destroyed. Unfortunately, the carrier's contract required it to have $100,000 in insurance, and it made them strictly liable for any damage. The problem was they never checked the value before they picked it up, right? It turns out that the scissor lift was worth $350,000. So they thought their liability was capped at 100,000, but that was just their insurance coverage and not their actual liability limit.
Oof. So if I'm paying attention, we've heard that late notice of a loss, poor or incomplete documentation, and not knowing the value of a load are common mistakes that people often make when filing an insurance claim. But are there any other thoughts specifically when it comes to this?
Yeah, really two other big ones to mention, right? Failure to mitigate your loss and then not understanding your contract. So first, mitigation. You can't control when an accident happens, right? But what you can control often is how big the exposure gets, how big that loss becomes. So what you want to do is you want to salvage what's not damaged. You want to get temperature controlled storage lined up as fast as possible if it's needed. And then you want to avoid any premature disposal. So let's say, for example, you have a 7-pallet shipment of ice cream and 2 of the pallets get damaged in an accident, but 5 of the pallets are still intact. Get the undamaged pallets to a freezer as soon as you can to salvage what you can. And then secondarily, contracts. Contracts can shift liability in ways that people just don't expect. A motor carrier can waive defenses contractually that they otherwise have under the law, and a freight broker can assume liability that they wouldn't otherwise typically have. So if contracts aren't reviewed carefully in advance of when the loss happens, coverage and exposure can quickly become misaligned. You really need to know what you're signing.
That is such good insight. Now, kind of walk us through with this wrap up. I mean, what are the fixes for common claim mistakes?
It's really just being proactive. You want to report your loss promptly. You want to document aggressively. You want to know the value of what you're moving before you pick it up. You want to mitigate whenever possible, and you want to understand your contracts before the loss happens. Now, of course, these steps won't prevent every loss, Malcolm, but what they will do is they'll make a significant difference in how smoothly the claim is handled and also how much exposure you have.
One of the best in the industry, as always. Excellent stuff, Mr. Craig Leinauer. Craig, thank you so much for being here on the show, man. It's super insightful and always love having you on.
Thank you, Malcolm. It is truly my pleasure.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And that was a great opening start to the show. Absolutely loved that conversation with Craig. And now I want to change, I guess, the tempo a little bit, because I'm going to bring somebody who's got a lot of energy and is coming fresh off the heels of one of the biggest events in the industry. She has hopefully not the manifest hangover, but she's going to be awesome. I want to join the show now with Jennifer Karpus-Romain, the executive director of the Transportation Marketing and Sales Association. Jennifer, what is up? Talk to me.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. How you doing? I'm hopeful that you got home safe. It seems like you did.
I did, and I've been taking my emergency, which is really important.
Oh,
Yeah.
did you get sick?
I always do when I travel, but I take it just for good measure.
All right, so let's talk through it. When it comes to emergency, are you a raspberry gal? Or are you more so the tangerine? What's the flavor of choice? I'm a raspberry guy.
I'm a tangerine kind of gal.
Okay, okay, you got good taste. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. Well, again, thank you for being on the show. Even though you're sick, that means a lot to me and a lot to our listeners. And for those that don't know you, which if you don't know her, you're missing somebody who has some great content. You should definitely follow her on all platforms. Talk a little bit about who you are as well as the work you do with the TMSA.
Absolutely. So I am Jennifer Karpus-Romain. I am the executive director of the Transportation Marketing and Sales Association, which is a trade nonprofit in the space that's really geared towards helping sales and marketing professionals learn, grow, connect together. And as the organization has evolved over time, we've seen more and more people in like HR coming in because of recruitment, account managers, customer success, customer experience, and really anyone, company leaders that are going to care about messaging and communication and getting the word about your business and differentiators. And that's really what we're all about. And then I came into TMSA first as a member of the organization, selling CRM technology to the industry, and just fell in love with TMSA. So when they were looking for new leadership back in 2021, I threw my hat in the ring, and here I am.
Here you are thriving and making it happen. And Jennifer, that's a great segue to my next question because you have done, sales when it came to CRM tech, and now you're in the driver's seat leading this great organization. I mean, 100+ years old. It's absolutely nuts the work you're doing. How did this change kind of shape your perspective when it comes to the industry right now?
I think the biggest thing for me is knowing that I was never in the seat of the person actually selling or marketing freight, and being open and honest about that and not pretending, but then allowing my members to drive those conversations, to drive the content. We have such a great network of the board of directors and the education committee. Like, people are like, oh, how do you pick who goes on stage at TMSA? I'm like, well, I don't necessarily pick. I let the people in our organization drive those decisions to put the very best educational content on our stage. And so that's really important. I, of course, will come up with ideas of how we can shape that content. I like different types. So we have panels, we have breakout sessions geared towards particular tracks. We've done like lightning round, just like storytelling type sessions. This year, our keynote is actually going to be an AI technology showdown. And so if you are in AI or technology and you have a great innovation that's really changing the game, submit, because we're taking applications through this Friday, February 20th, and we want the best of technology that's actually improving efficiency in this industry right now on our stage. So always changing the pace, always thinking through, but knowing that I've been a professor before at community colleges. I've been on that sales tech side of things, and then just really listening to our members for the past 4 or 5 years. How can we then advance the organization to meet the actual needs of our members? And so that's really what I've done, accepting that I'm not an expert on all things, but you have an organization that really believes in the cause and are expert at all things, and bringing the very best to the table to be able to execute the very best for our members and conference attendees.
And you definitely do. And I want to talk about your mentality because as a leader, you got to have two things, and it's clear that you have them. It's being growth oriented and having vision. And with that, one of your priorities has been, of course, growth and community engagement. But what does this mean in practice for the TMSA, and especially for sales and marketing professionals when it comes to transportation? Because those aren't always things that are kind of front of mind and kind of centrally focused, but you've managed to do so. And it's really, really, really impressive.
Mhm. So I think the number one thing that every leader needs to have is a listening ear. It's not always about us talking. It's about us listening to what our members, what our conference attendees, what the industry actually needs right now. And that was coming in, and people were like, oh, we want more webinars. Well, in truth, they don't, because we had a bunch of webinars and they didn't come to them. So let's think about how they actually want to receive information, what they are actually attending, how are they receiving information, and how can we better cater that type of content, which jumping ahead a little bit, but we actually launched a track-based model for TMSA this year. So now any member, any conference attendee coming to TMSA can pick between a company leader, a sales leader, a marketing leader, sales practitioner, or marketing practitioner track. So you're getting the type of content that's most relevant for you and your role today to you as we develop this. So as you travel through Elevate, if you come June 7th through 9th in Denver this year, you'll be able to kind of travel with your cohort of people that are also in similar roles to you. You can go into the member portal and search by your track. So that way, the most important information for you today is accessible to you as quickly as possible. I think, as you said, like, education for sales and marketing people is not always top of mind. Professional development for those roles are not always top of mind. Even getting people to come to an educational oriented conference instead of a conference that sell can be a hard sell for a lot of companies. But you need to professionally develop these roles. These are the people that are bringing in that revenue that you want to be top of their game all the time, to know what's happening in this industry and outside of this industry so they can apply it as quickly as possible.
You brought up diversifying the board when it comes to not just backgrounds, but in voices and experiences. Now, what has inspired this focus, and what changes are you currently seeing right now?
Mm-hmm. So we have a large board. It's since I was on the board before I vacated the board to come to leadership, we have over 20 people. Wow. And I want all of those voices to be different. I love our legacy board members that have been a part of TMSA for 10, 15 years. There is a history there and an understanding of what has worked and what hasn't worked in the past. But our needs are growing, and different people represent different concepts or ideas. So when I took over TMSA, I thought about, how do we get people under 30 or under 35? Because some of them have had birthdays, and so they've aged out a little bit. But how do we get different ethnicities? How do we make sure that our gender is represented? Having all of those different voices, and voices that aren't afraid to speak to that group at large, will be able to better meet the needs of not just our membership today, but where our membership could grow tomorrow. Like you said at the beginning, this is a 102-year-old organization. If we don't keep evolving and we don't keep meeting the needs of what our members and conference attendees need today and tomorrow, we're not going to exist for another 102 years. So having that top leadership level, that board of directors have diversity of thought, and having different types of people on the board with different voices is only going to help us amplify everything that we should be doing for the industry right now.
You're such a freaking rock star. As you're sitting here talking, I'm just over here cheering and hooting and hollering because it's that way, right? Like, diversity of thought is super, super important, and having multiple different viewpoints in different areas is, I love what you're saying. And I want to talk because there's a saying that my mentor used to tell me. It's either you evolve or you evaporate. And that's always been something that's been front of mind too, is like, all right, like, how are we kind of changing what we do here? And you're also in the podcast space. And I want you to talk about your podcast. You're no stranger to it. You're about 2 years in, if I did my research correctly, but kind of walk us, as well as, listeners, just about what you're doing in the podcast space and where they can go in to tune in and hear more from you, because you're so insightful.
Well, thank you so much for that. So TMSA will hit our 2-year mark of On the Move in April this year. So everything that we have at TMSA is forward momentum. So when we named the podcast, we named it On the Move. Like our monthly newsletter is moving forward. Our conference is Elevate. Like, we really like the momentum. Our awards are the Trailblazers and the Rising Stars. So it's all about forward momentum and growth. And in the podcast, it was really important to me to create a space where people associated with TMSA have their voice heard. I started my career in journalism, so I wanted to do an interview-based show where we highlight what they're doing, what the top marketing and sales minds in the industry are doing, but also those people who are starting their career that might not have the opportunity to go on a podcast, or the marketer that's constantly pushing their president onto the podcast, but not their voice put out there, because that's what my members care about, what their peers are doing and what they could be doing. And so I have people that will reach out to be like, oh, we have this great voice for your show. And I will be like, oh, are you going to come into TMSA? Are you going to come to an event? Are you going to partner with us in some way? Because if you don't, I don't put them on the show. It's about creating a community and letting those voices rise and give a space for that to happen.
No, you definitely do a wonderful job. I can tell in our conversation, and I've heard some content from you. And I want to talk about this next column. We have our little columns here. It's like a Sports Center back in the day, and let's talk about track-based models, because this is a track-based model that you were referring to when it comes to the TMSA. Why is this? Who benefits from it? And kind of walk us through what this looks like from a glance.
Mm-hmm. So it's those 5 tracks I referenced before: company leader, sales leader, marketing practitioner, and sales practitioner. These are the 5 that we're starting with. And the reason why we launched these tracks is because we realized that we weren't diversifying the content enough to be able to reach all of our members. So at conference, we would do like a marketing breakout and a sales breakout. But then our marketing leaders were like, hey, we need to know trends. We need to know what's coming next. And then our marketing practitioners were like, no, we need the tactful, hands-on information to move faster, to get our job done quicker. And so we just weren't hitting the mark to be able to meet both of those needs. So we thought, okay, well, a marketing leader needs different types of content delivered to them than a marketing practitioner. So for us to do that successfully, we need to then create these tracks. Everybody has so much on their plate right now. They have only a limited amount of time. How can we make their path better and give them the content that they need, but also utilize TMSA in a way that their whole sales and marketing team and those adjacent teams to maximize their membership. So like a corporate member, a partner member, they can have up to 10 people on the account. So creating different types of content areas for them to be successful is really important. And also giving opportunities and highlighting those opportunities for our younger team members to develop. So like, there's a lot of companies out there in transportation and logistics with one marketing person. How is this person ever going to get leadership experience? They can come to TMSA, they can join a committee, they can lead a subcommittee, they can lead a committee, and then they can say, hey, I led a volunteer group of 10 people and got them to do work when I wasn't even paying them to make them do it, but I inspired them to. And that's what we're building here at TMSA.
And it is absolutely incredible to watch in real time you build this with the rest of your team. And there's a component about you that I absolutely love. Of course, you're very, very insightful, but it's no secret. I called you the Queen Connector before you hopped on the show, because if you don't know somebody, you know somebody that knows somebody. And with that, it comes with events. You're coming off of the heels of Manifest in Vegas last week. Of course, Mats is coming up. But like, talk to me a little bit about, the why behind these events. And if there's industry professionals not necessarily going, why would you advocate for them to kind of immerse themselves in going into these events and the return on that investment? What would that look like?
Mm-hmm. So I do think it's good to think exactly what you want out of the event and make sure that you mark those. I did an interview with one of my members, Ash Toms from ITS Logistics, who's their event manager. And I said, like, what is the ROI and why do you do all these shows? And asked all those questions. But there is nothing like meeting people in person. And like you said, if you don't know somebody, they know somebody. So the amount of people I get to meet from friends of friends of friends at these types of shows, yes, Manifest last week, there's over 7,000 people there. And I feel like I didn't talk to 7,000, but I talked to many and many, many of them, got to know people, got to network them, and got to bounce ideas, like tell them about these track programs and see if that resonates with people outside of my my network and hearing their food of thought and getting people excited for what we're doing and listening to them. For me, I love to go to these places and do like TMSA networking events. So all the sales and marketing people can come together for 1 hour during this crazy show. But really getting out there, making those connections. This industry is huge, but it's so small too. Like it's such a community. And even at a show of that size, you can really feel at home, get to know people, make real connections. And if you're not there, then you're missing that opportunity to connect in that way.
Absolutely, Jennifer. How can folks that are listening right now stay connected to the work that you're doing with the TMSA?
Absolutely. If you want more information about TMSA Elevate, which is June 7th through 9th in Denver this year, you can go to events.tmsatoday.org. You can email me at jennifer@tmsatoday.org, or our regular website's tmsatoday.org. Pretty common theme here throughout this, but would love to talk TMSA or connections or any of those things with anyone listening today.
Jennifer Karpus-Romain. Jennifer, you are a dime a dozen. I really appreciate it. You did great.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much. Again, Jennifer Karpus-Romain with the TMSA. It's been a great show. And where would we be if we didn't go directly to the man that knows a thing or two about the space? I love having this guy on the show. Honestly, I think Danny could have a 60-minute spot and I wouldn't get tired of hearing him talk because he just knows, man. So now joining me is the one and only Danny Ramon representing Overhaul. Danny, my brother, what's going on, man?
Not much, Malcolm. Thank you very much. And you are correct. I can definitely talk for an hour straight.
No, but it's like, man, I try to get to you because there's so much good stuff that you're saying. So like anytime you're on the show, I love it. And with that, I want to get to it because we talk about cargo theft literally all the time. But what's one of the biggest weak points in freight that not necessarily isn't the trailer, but it's a bill of lading? Kind of explain this to me because I saw this and I was like, nah, this doesn't make sense. But the more I was looking into it, I'm like, okay, it might make some sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, right? And the thing is, our industry tends to run on ink and paper, which is a bit odd being that we're in 2026. But, the bill of lading is pretty much taken as gospel, especially at receiving facilities. Everyone assumes that the bill of lading is correct. And that assumption is what makes that bill of lading dangerous and vulnerable.
Now, Danny, can you just kind of explain this to me because I can't wrap in my head in 2026 because the release it cited 52 billion has been lost in terms of freight fraud and cargo theft. But why is something in 2026 tied to a piece of paper? Like it just doesn't. It's not getting through my head when it comes to a bill of lading.
Yeah, and it doesn't make sense when you just think about it on the surface. But when you look into the system, right, our supply chain system is incredibly fractured and fragmented. And that means that everybody's operating on different systems. And when you're operating on different systems, it really makes standardization impossible without added processes. And added processes are the enemy of efficiency. And nobody, unfortunately, anybody who's involved in supply chain security knows security often falls to the wayside behind efficiency.
Yeah, definitely. Now, take us on a little ride. What does a typical case of BOL fraud look like? I mean, kind of draw the typical scenario, paint the picture for us.
Yeah, I mean, it's really scary because unless you know what you're looking for and unless you've got like super granular visibility, you don't know when it happens, right? But it happens after departure, before delivery. What usually happens is a driver's going to go and pick it up. Maybe the legitimate driver, maybe not. They may be sprinkling in a couple of other strategic theft MOs on top of there, such as double and triple brokering fraud. But once it's picked up, once it's in the hands of the bad guys, whether it's double brokered or not, the bad guys are going to digitally alter the BOL. It's pretty common knowledge now that everybody's got the ability on a smartphone to snap a photo of a paper document, turn it into a PDF, and edit that PDF, right? Yep. And if you can edit that PDF to show, hey, I don't have 40 pallets in the back of my trailer, I've got 2. And it's not 40,000 pounds, it's 2,000 pounds. And it's not seal number 1, 2, 3, it's actually seal 4, 5, 6. And you get to destination, you show them that piece of paper, everything lines up on that piece of paper with what's in the back of your trailer. If the folks at destination don't have a reason to question that, they're not going to. LTL is a very common thing in this industry, right? So it's not going to raise red flags in and of itself.
No, it's definitely not. And I want to ask, because when it comes to, kind of what you mentioned, when somebody is, changing, whether it's a commodity, whether it's a pallet count, whether it's, just an overall type of, line item thing on the BOL, who eats the costs? Is it the broker? Is it the shipper? Is it the carrier? I mean, what does that look like?
It really depends on contracts and liability, right? That's
Right.
the short answer. But the even shorter answer is usually the shipper. And that's because of how the criminals target this particular MO, right? They're going to target based on the receiving facility. They're looking for, typically the profile that they're looking to fit is something like a big box retail receiving facility or similar that's going to be receiving from dozens, if not hundreds of different shippers, meaning that they're not going to have bespoke processes for each shipper that comes through their gates. Those shippers are going to have to conform to their receiving processes.
Now, how often does it come down to, all right, like which document is real? Is it this one? Is it this one? I mean, what does that look like?
Once it's discovered, which document is real is usually not in question.
Okay.
At that point, the receiver knows this is what we ordered, and the shipper knows this is what we shipped. Once both documents come to light, there's discrepancies there, and it's pretty obvious which one is the correct one and which one is not. The problem is, how long does it take you to discover that discrepancy in the first one, and how many shipments have happened since that one happened and you discovered it?
Okay.
In some cases, we've seen hundreds of shipments happen in that gap.
Jeez, holy cow. Now, is there, more common, I guess scenarios in certain freight types, whether it's like high value retail, food and beverage? I mean, I imagine cross border, given your experience and things. But what does that look like?
The criminals are very agile, right? And they're willing to target whatever they're going to be able to liquidate quickly. That said, this method really enables theft of high value consumer goods, primarily electronics. But again, anything that's going to be flowing through a big box retail style or even e-tail style receiving facility is going to be a target, because anything that's going to go through that process where there's no oversight on the BOL, there's no matching to the original documents that existed at origin, is going to be vulnerable to this type of theft. And we know that these folks are, they're able to turn on a dime. They can pivot very quickly. So when it comes to what's being targeted, oftentimes they know before we do, but pretty much anything that they can sell.
No doubt about it. Now, let's talk about the solution. Secure BOL at a glance. What does this look like? Kind of give us a skinny on what this is.
Essentially, it's something that removes all barriers to use, right?
Okay.
We don't want to interrupt or get in the way of efficiency, right? We know that when that happens, those procedures are typically not going to be used, especially if they have to be used by people who are not invested stakeholders, right? If you don't hold the liability, your desire to add extra processes into your workflow is going to be much, much, much lower. So basically what we do is we add a step in. It's not even really a process step or a procedural step. It's just an extra piece in the workflow that happens behind the scenes. So normally, if you're concerned at all about strategic theft, double brokering, or anything like that, you're taking photos at origin. What this does is the photo of the BOL that you take at origin is then encoded into a QR code. That QR code can then be opened and verified by the receiving facility with no logins, no accounts, and they can verify what the document looked like when it left the origin dock, make sure that it matches both the document that they're being handed at the receiving dock and what's in the trailer.
Now, question for you on that QR piece, because, it's, I guess, making it tamper evident and tied to the physical document. Why wouldn't you just go kind of fully digital?
Again, it has to do with the fact that you need buy-in from all these folks who are not necessarily holding the liability, right?
That makes sense.
And in order to do that, you've got to remove every possible barrier to entry for this. You've got to make it as easy as possible and as efficient as possible if you want folks to use it. Now, the receivers know, a lot of them know that receiving shorted loads is not beneficial to them, right? It's going to end up with empty shelves for them and a myriad of other costs that are going to be factored into that as well. So a lot of them will actually perform chargebacks. If they receive a load that is shorter than what they ordered, they will charge back the difference to the shipper. So knowing that chargeback doesn't cover their full operational costs for missing product. So even though they don't necessarily hold the stick when it comes to liability, they are still incentivized at least a little bit to make sure that everything is going smoothly. So we need to so what we do is we make sure that this assists them in that, make sure that it's going to secure their supply chain, even if they don't hold the liability.
Definitely. Now, at delivery, the receiver, which you just mentioned, they can scan and see the original, right? And if something doesn't match, what happens to the load? Does it just stop right there? Or what's the protocol for that?
Again, efficiency is king. So, there's some cases in which, there's going to be some discrepancies and you're still going to accept the load, but you want to notate, hey, there's discrepancies. We've notated this. We can, document anything that needs to be documented for further follow-up or investigation. But essentially, right there from the QR code scan, you're going to have the option to accept, reject, or accept with discrepancies. And that can, mean a myriad of things in which you enter in notes. But again, discrepancies isn't always going to mean a rejected load, and we don't want to interrupt the workflow for these receiving facilities.
Let's say, for example, that this wasn't caught whenever, let's just say delivery happened, but it wasn't caught on site. What does the time and effort look like on the back end and really the front end when it comes to this?
Yeah, the worst case scenario for this is, something's accepted, the discrepancy on the BOL is not noticed. And like I mentioned before, hundreds of shipments happen before accounts receivable notices, hey, this shipment that was supposed to have 40 pallets only had 2. And that was back in October, and we're now in mid-January. At that point, you've got to start the investigation circuit, right? You've got to look into that carrier. You've got to look into potentially that broker. If it was a broker that was involved, you've got to start examining every single shipment that carrier or broker has been involved in. You have to start pulling paperwork that in many cases is months old and is going to be very man-hour intensive to pull this paperwork from 2 different locations and then run manual checks to make sure that they match. And when they don't match, then you've got to manually enter the discrepancies and then start tabulating the total losses, right? Which we all know that total losses are not limited just to the missing cargo.
No doubt at all. Now, I want to ask, do you think we're moving fully towards a digital proof of delivery future, or is paper always going to exist just given the industry and, the way we've always done things?
Eventually and ideally, we're looking at a fully digital future.
Okay.
Knowing what I know about the trucking industry, absent federal mandates, it's going to be a minute.
Yeah, I can only imagine because I was thinking the same thing. It's just like, looking at these logs and kind of, what's happened and the dragging of the feet and the mistakes and, things not being on the same type of system infrastructurally across the country. Like, it's a lot to ask. So that's why I was just curious what your thoughts were.
Well, one thing is change doesn't usually come from governmental organizations in this industry. Change comes from those of us in the industry who have the lowest risk tolerance. Looking at them, what are they doing? What is their posture? They tend to signal the way forward for our industry. So I highly suggest everybody, as I always do, get involved with the industry associations because that's where our low risk tolerance folks are, and that's where they're preaching the gospel, and that's where they're telling you exactly what needs to be done.
That's real, Danny. That's real. Now, if I'm a mid-sized carrier watching this right now, why should I care? What's the ROI behind this?
Yeah, because carriers, drivers are always being asked to download new apps and conform with new policies and procedures, right? But for this one, there is an ROI for the carrier and for the driver. And to me, that's avoiding investigations, avoiding your insurance cost spiking, and the big one for me, avoiding being blacklisted, right? If you're involved in a theft like this, the industry is pretty well aware of these types of networks, these bad actor networks, and we share intelligence, right? If you end up on a blacklist from someone maybe who's not doing full due diligence and full post-event investigation, you may be the victim here, but your company may then be blacklisted in the supply chain and you will have no recourse, right? So making sure that everything you do is above board and you're not being victimized at the same time as the shipper or the receiver is really key to make sure that your business is allowed to continue running and is going to be sustainable.
Truly the best in the game. Danny, thank you so much for being here. Where can we learn more information about what you and the great team at Overhaul are doing? And I'm just so thankful for all you do, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on. As always, over-haul.com for all the latest and greatest news in terms of what we're doing to secure the supply chain. Also follow Overhaul on LinkedIn and myself as well, Danny Ramon on LinkedIn. I'm always trying to put out relevant, actionable, open source intelligence.
Danny Razor Ramon, I appreciate you, brother.
Thank you, sir. You have a good one.
You as well. Special thanks to, again, Danny, as well as Jennifer and Craig for being on the show today. But Wednesday show, ladies and gentlemen, the road ahead is going to be a windy one because we got my man, Robbie Nathan. He is the co-founder and CEO of Envoy AI, as well as in studio, Chris Torrance, Chief Strategy Officer at MapUp. These two guys are legends. Both of their calls went super well with me. I don't know if we're going to have enough time, man, but we're going to make it happen. Today, again, is the perfect day to boss up. Appreciate you guys. This has been another episode of What the Truck. I'm Malcolm Harris. It's the peace sign, the salute. I'll see you on Wednesday.